as well, just to make sure that you're understanding. Okay, so I'll take you through basic principles of fracture fixation. The objectives of this lecture are that I want you all to understand the principles of absolute stability. We will review how absolute stability can be achieved with plates and screws. We will understand how a screw and plate anatomy actually works, and we'll try and understand the technique for lag screw insertion as well. So simple 4 objectives we'll go through. If you've attended an AO course, then I'm extremely sorry because this is essentially lifted up from there. And I would like to thank Alan Norrish because a lot of the slides come from Alan Norrish. Thanks, Alan. So if you define absolute stability, the definition is that the surfaces of the fracture would not displace or move under any functional load. And this can be achieved with interfragmentary compression, which is what you're trying to achieve. In this type of fracture healing, you have minimal callus, so you will not see callus formation. The fracture is completely compressed, and the strain is virtually zero, so there's hardly any motion there. It's micromotion. Now that brings us to the important thing of Perrin's strain theory, and basically which states that if the two ends of the bones are moving too much, that is about 100%, then you will not get, let's go back to that, then you will not get bone formation, but you get granulation tissue at that. The bones are moving at about 17%, you get fibrous tissue. A fibrocartilage is 2 to 10%, and only when there is micromotion, then you get laminar bone formation, which is what you're trying to achieve in absolute stability. Now let's look at a screw. What exactly is a screw? We can ask the gentleman sitting here. You're looking fairly knowledgeable. How would you define a screw apart from a pleasurable experience? Okay, that's fine. How would you define a screw? What is a screw? It's a machine, okay. Fantastic, very good. So what exactly is it? The screw is an inclined plane wrapped around a cylinder, if you have to describe it. And as you correctly mentioned, it converts a horizontal rotational force into axial motion. So when you turn it, it's actually moving in that direction. So correct. And then the parts of a screw. Let's look at the head. So you've got the head and you've got different parts or different things in the head. You've got a round head in a round hole, and that allows us angulatory motion, so the screw can angulate. That's the core of the screw. So they ask you in the exam, what's the core? That's the core. That's the shaft. And then you have threads on the shaft, which are at an incline, and what is pitch? How do you define pitch? You, sir. What's the pitch of a screw? Anybody? Absolutely. So distance covered in one 360-degree turn. So that's the pitch of a screw. And then obviously the last thing of the screw is your tip. So those are the parts of a screw, and that's a favorite exam question. What are the parts of a screw? And the next thing is, how do you differentiate between a small and a large fragment screw? Now we do fix ankle fractures all the time, and we're fixing fractures, but this is important to understand that in a 3.5 millimeter cortical screw, the core is 2.4 millimeter. So you need a drill of 2.5 millimeters, and the outside is 3.5 millimeter. Whereas in a 4.5 millimeter cortical screw, it's a 3.1 millimeter core. That's why you'll use a 3.2 millimeter drill, and the outside is 4.5 millimeter. So that's fairly basic and important to understand. In terms of the difference between the cortical and the cancellous screws, in your cortical screw, you can see that you'll have smaller threads, whereas you've got larger threads in cancellous screws. What are the functions of a screw? That's another question which they ask you. So positional screws will hold the fracture. Plate screw will also obviously hold as well, and lag screw will compress.